And all this assembly shall know that the Lord saveth not with sword and spear. But the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. This is one of those moments in Scripture where everything in the scene is stacked in a way that makes human confidence feel almost predictable. On one side, you have Goliath, a seasoned warrior, physically imposing, armed, trained, and accustomed to winning through sheer force. On the other side, you had David, not a soldier in the traditional sense, no armor worth mentioning or military reputation, just a small shepherd boy. From a purely natural perspective, the outcome seems obvious, and yet David doesn't frame the situation in natural terms. He reframes it completely. The battle is the Lord's. That sentence is doing a lot of work. It doesn't mean David is passive. He still picks up the sling. He still moves forward and he engages in the situation in front of him. But the foundation of his competence is not his own ability. It's not his military strength or his skill comparison or his experience. It's the conviction that the outcome of this moment is ultimately determined by God, the Most High, not by human superiority. That's a different way of seeing conflict altogether, because most human conflict is evaluated on the basis of visible resources. Strength versus strength, strategy versus strategy, advantages versus disadvantage. David introduces a different category entirely: divine involvement. And he says something else that matters just as much. The Lord saveth not with sword and spear. In other words, God is not limited to the tools people expect him to use. Human beings tend to assume that outcomes are determined by the most visible instruments of power. But Scripture repeatedly shows a different pattern. God is not constrained by conventional strength. He is not dependent on the expected instruments of victory. A bicycle ride offers a simple illustration of this. Most riders assume progress depends on strength, gear, and technique. Those things matter, of course. But anyone who has ridden long enough knows that conditions matter just as much. Wind direction, terrain, timing, even small adjustments in posture or pacing can change the experience significantly. And sometimes what looks like a disadvantage at the beginning of a ride becomes irrelevant when the environment shifts. What seemed overwhelming at the start may not hold the same weight when something else changes the conditions entirely. David is essentially saying that the conditions of this battle are not defined by Goliath's appearance or weaponry. They are defined by God's involvement. And all this assembly shall know. That's another important part of the verse. This is not just about David and Goliath. It's not even just about Israel and the Philistines. It becomes a testimony, a public declaration about who God is and how he acts. The outcome will communicate something larger than military victory. It will reveal that deliverance does not depend on human strength, that God is not restricted to expected methods, and what looks impossible within human limitations is not impossible for God the Most High. That theme runs consistently through Scripture. God working through unlikely people, unlikely methods, and unexpected outcomes, so that the focus remains on him rather than human capability. As the work week closes, this verse lands with a particular kind of weight, because most people don't face giants in literal battlefields. That many people do face situations that feel overwhelming in their own way. Pressures that feel larger than available strength. Problems that feel disproportionate to available resources. Circumstances that make human confidence feel thin. And this passage doesn't minimize those realities. It simply reframes them. The battle is not ultimately defined by what you can or cannot do. It is defined by the one who stands over it. David still acts, but he does not rely on himself as the final answer. He trusts that the outcome belongs to God. And according to this verse, that is where true competence begins. Not in the size of the challenge, but in the nature of the one who is greater than it. And we all know how that story ends, folks. Thank you for joining me here today, my friends, my family, and anyone else out there who might be riding along and listening as we close out this here work week. I hope to see you here again on Sunday, and until then, Abba willing, Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom.